They say the dead can't hurt you, that once life leaves the body, what's left is nothing more than a shell, just a relic of what was. Only memories remain as the physical body decays, dust to dust. But sometimes it appears that death isn't the final chapter of the story. Hidden in the quiet corners of history, there were those who believed that death wasn't the end, but the beginning of something far darker. Mercy Brown was a girl from Exeter, a small town in Rhode Island. She died on a cold January day in 1892, at the age of 19, taken by the same cruel hand that had claimed her mother and sister before her, the wasting disease that withers away the body until nothing remains, tuberculosis. But when Mercy died and the third body of the family was added to the cemetery, it was not grief that gripped the town, but fear, sweeping through the villagers as they became concerned that this was not the last they would see of Mercy Brown. You see, conventional wisdom at this time, in this area, suggested that if one family suffered multiple deaths in a short time span like the Browns had, that something supernatural was to blame. Her family had certainly suffered enough. Her father George had to watch helplessly as death visited his home again and again. And when his only son Edwin fell ill with the same sickness, and his body too began wasting away like his wife and daughters before, desperation drove George to those dark, quiet corners. George decided to allow his fellow villagers, the town doctor, and a newspaper reporter to exhume the bodies of his deceased family 2 months after Mercy died, to see if they could find anything sinister on which to place blame. Mercy's mother and sister showed normal levels of decomposition, since they'd been dead for years at this point. However, Mercy was different. She'd only been dead 2 months, and her body was stored in an above-ground crypt during the harsh, freezing Rhode Island winter, so her body had barely decomposed at all. Of course, the villagers did not see this logic, particularly because when they cut into her chest, they found that she still even had blood in her heart. What they saw was a vampire. This was enough to convince them, enough to make them believe that Mercy was no longer their daughter, their sister, their friend, that she was something else, that her undead dealings were now the cause of her brother's sickness. So in response, they cut out her heart and liver and burned them to ash. They mixed the ashes with water and gave it to her ailing brother to drink, intending for this gruesome potion to counteract Mercy's power and release her grip on him from the other side. In an extra cruel twist of fate, their father George never contracted tuberculosis and even lived just long enough to see doctors create the vaccine that could have saved his family. As for Edwin, he drank that fateful potion, but still went on to die just 2 months later. Some say this proves that Mercy was no vampire, while others say it was her final act of treachery. Mercy Brown died just a girl, but history remembers her as something more. On those cold January nights, she still makes us question, what is it about death that frightens us so much? Is it the finality of it, or the possibility that it might not be so final after all? We say we don't believe in such things like vampires anymore, but when we think of Mercy Brown, we can still hear the whispers from those dark, quiet corners.